When Derek Carr went down with an injury last weekend against the Packers, it felt like he'd be out for multiple weeks and at the very least, miss one game. But is there a chance now he'll play this Sunday against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Let's talk about it right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast.
You're listening to the Straight Up Saints podcast.
What is up, Who Dat Nation? It's your host, Chris Vogel of the Straight Up Saints podcast. And as always, we're brought to you by Scott McNair, injury lawyers who've been injured in any kind of accident, car, truck, 18-wheeler, or hurt offshore. Scott McNair handles it all. You give him a call at 504-500-1111 for a free consultation. They'll always fight for the win. And we have a very, very interesting development this Friday coming out of the Saints facility. Derek Carr was at practice the past 2 days, but kind of just walking around, hanging out with the coaches, hanging out with the teammates. A little bit different this Friday. Derek Carr not only being present at practice, but getting some throws in, had the pads on, participated to a limited degree there with the Saints. And I think at the very least, this is going to open the door for him to potentially play Sunday against the Buccaneers. In just a minute, we could talk about whether or not that would be the right move or the smart move. But before we do that, let's go back to a comment that Derek Carr made a couple of days ago when he was talking about his status. And this is what he said when he was discussing whether or not he'll play against the Bucs. He said, "I'm going to do everything I can to be out there with my guys. And if I can play, I'll play. If I physically just can't play, then I can't play. But if I'm out there, that means there's no fear of re-injury. There's no fear of not being able to help the team out. I'm doing everything I can to be out there, but I never want to hurt the team at the same time." So clearly, when it comes to pain tolerance, being able to have that flexibility in the shoulder, which is what he hurt that AC joint on Sunday, that matters for Derek Carr. If he can't handle it, he won't be out there. He doesn't feel like he can make the throws. But I've mentioned this throughout the week. I mentioned it on Sunday. I mentioned it on Monday. And now I'll mention it again today. Derek Carr has played through a lot of injuries in his NFL career. And I think at this point in his career where he comes to New Orleans because he wants to win, wants to play with this championship level defense, I think there is that obviously competitive fire where he wants to be out there Sunday. And the fact that he is throwing practices, even if it's to a limited degree this Friday, is a pretty good sign for starters that at the very least, if he were to miss a game, it would be one game. And the Saints can hold down the fort in that instant. But I think there's a legitimate chance that we could see him out there on Sunday. He is a tough player. And I think for Derek Carr, when it comes to pain tolerance, we've seen him play through an ankle injury. We've seen him play, I believe, through a calf injury. It was it was a Thursday night game, hurt himself, came back the next week, no problem, played. Derek he's a tough dude. And I think this is going to be interesting. And I think the Saints are going to have to make the decision as to whether or not they want to protect the player from themselves or give him an extra week of rest. But at the very least, you guys should be happy about this, because if he doesn't play Sunday and it is Jameis Winston, well, I do think Jameis can hold down the fort for 1 week. But even better on top of that is Derek can come back soon. And the importance of having Derek Carr here is they got to figure out this offense. And that's where I get in this bind. Part of me is like, man, if he gets hit again and we know this offensive line hasn't been protecting, you start to wonder, does maybe something that could have been just a 1 or 2 week absence balloon to 5-6 weeks because you rushed him back? But there is that other part, and I think it's very important to mention, this offense is struggling. They're really struggling. They have a defense that doesn't give up more than 20 points, which in today's NFL is outstanding, but they're struggling to get 17. They're struggling to get 20 of their own. And that's putting them in a difficult situation. So if Derek were to miss a game, maybe 2 games, it might not seem like much in the grand scheme. And like I said, I think Jameis Winston is more than capable of holding down the fort for the Saints. But there is that added concern that, okay, if he were to miss some time, when he comes back, what's it like? Is this offense stalling even more than it already was? Because you got to get back to your rhythm. You got to get back to those cadences that he has at the line of scrimmage. That's the concern. So there's the added part of, man, I don't want to see him take more hits behind an offensive line that's already given up 12 sacks in just 3 games. And then there's the other side of it. If there is a quarterback change and you do have a different guy under center for a game, maybe 2 games, maybe 3, whatever it may be, although it obviously won't be 3 if Derek's practicing on this Friday, what happens when he comes back? How long does it take this offense to get going? Do they ever really get going to where they need to? Because, man, we've made it very clear, if the Saints play complementary football, this is a damn good team. But it's going to be interesting to see. For what it's worth, this is a Tampa Bay defense right now that they'll go up against that is a little banged up. No Kalijah Kancey. We'll see if Vita Vea plays. He's missed a couple practices this week. Jamel Dean, one of their corners, will be out. Carlton Davis, game time decision. Even if he does play, he won't be at full strength. And this is also a Tampa Bay defense that I said last week against the Eagles. Granted, insane rushing attack. gave up over 200 yards on the ground. And with Alvin Kamara back, maybe there is less pressure on Derek Carr. Maybe it's a little bit more dink and dunk, get the ball out of his hands quick. Utilize those tight ends, which we've really raved about through July, through August, and leading up to week 1 of the season, but they haven't really been used yet. So maybe it's a different approach. Either way, regardless of the quarterback is, I'd imagine the offensive line has to play their best game. You don't get your quarterback hurt 1 week and then the next week not show up. That is a wake-up call for a lot of people. But who's going to be the quarterback under center? It's anyone's question right now, and who knows? Who knows? But the fact that Derek is at practice, the door is open, and Tampa Bay is going to have to prepare for 2 different quarterbacks, which I'd imagine they've done. When you have a defensive mind like Todd Bowles as head coach, you're doing everything you can to make sure you have some type of advantage. And I'd imagine you prepared for both, which is good news for the Saints. That's more work that their opponent had to put in, and we'll see what happens. But this is a really, really interesting development. And as always, I'm fascinated to know what you guys have to say about this, because I personally thought you sit Derek, you start Jameis Winston for a game, then we reassess next week. But you could tell with the way Derek spoke at the press conferences, the way he's walking around practice, the guy wants to be out there, obviously. He doesn't want to get paid to sit. This is a competitor, and it's tough to sit those dudes. It really is. So it could go either way. Derek can play Sunday, and we can all hold our breath every time he gets hit. He can come out on Sunday and turn in an inspired performance, and we can go do a complete 180, going from talking about a Saints collapse at Green Bay to maybe a little bit of a revival in the Dome and moving to 3-1. So many possibilities here. As always, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Do you want Derek Carr to play this Sunday? Do you think it'd be a little foolish if he does? Do you think it's a gutsy thing? I want to know your opinion, and I will throw it out while I'm on that subject. That's the name of the game. He comes out, if he plays on Sunday and he plays great, it'll be called a heroic, a gutsy, whatever Herculean effort that you want to use, whatever adjective, positive, that's what they're going to give to Derek. If he comes out, plays bad, it's going to be called a stupid decision. That's the nature of this business. I'm sure he knows that's the risk that you run when you come out there. But like I said, it's football at the end of the day, and these guys don't want to miss a single snap. But that's going to wrap it up for this really brief edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. As always, subscribe for more content on Brew Crew Media, and stay tuned for more content here from the Straight Up Saints podcast, the destination for the Who Dat Nation.